A little girl sat on the cold cafeteria floor beside a trash can, clutching her lunch tray like it was something fragile. Her voice trembled so softly that almost no one heard it. "Please, not here." Across the room, children laughed at bright tables. Teachers walked past. No one stopped. But one man did. A quiet millionaire who had built companies worth billions froze when he saw her. He stepped closer, kneeling beside the trembling child. And in that moment he noticed something clipped to her small backpack. 3 letters. A simple school rule. But what that rule really meant would soon shake an entire district, and expose a cruelty hidden behind smiling hallways. If stories about kindness, courage, and standing up for those who have no voice mean something to you, take a moment to subscribe. Because sometimes the smallest stories carry the biggest truths. Marcus Thorne had spent most of his life inside glass towers and quiet boardrooms. People called him many things in business magazines: visionary, investor, philanthropist, but the title that followed him everywhere was simpler: the Quiet Millionaire. Marcus wasn't loud, and he didn't chase cameras. He wrote checks that rebuilt schools, funded scholarships, and opened doors for children who had been told life would always stay small. That morning he stood inside Lincoln Grove Elementary, wearing a visitor badge stuck to his jacket. A cheerful sticker that said visitor in bold black letters. Around him, the school looked perfect. Bright posters covered the hallways. Every child matters. Kindness is our superpower. Together we rise. Principal Calvin Hargrove walked ahead of the group with polished confidence. His smile never slipped, not even for a second. "This school believes every student deserves opportunity," Hargrove said warmly as he guided the donor tour down the hallway. Board members nodded approvingly. Teachers greeted students who walked past wearing clean uniforms and bright smiles, the kind of smiles children practice when adults important enough to bring funding are watching. Marcus listened quietly. He always listened more than he spoke. A school choir stood ready in matching blue shirts at the end of the hall, rehearsing softly for the visitors. The scene felt like something out of a brochure. But Marcus had learned something about perfect pictures. Sometimes the most important truths live just outside the frame. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from Dana Clean. "Call me when you can." Scholarship audit question. Marcus stepped slightly away from the tour. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Quick call." Principal Hargrove nodded with smooth professionalism. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. We'll continue toward the media room." Marcus slipped into a side hallway, lifting the phone to his ear as the cheerful sounds of the tour faded behind him. But before the call connected, he heard something else. A small voice. Thin. Nervous. "Please, not here." Marcus stopped walking. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It sounded like the kind of whisper a child uses when she already believes no one will help her. He lowered the phone slowly. The voice came from a door marked Cafeteria Access. Marcus pushed it open. The cafeteria beyond was loud and busy. Lunch hour chaos. Kids talking, trays clattering, teachers calling instructions across the room. But the voice hadn't come from the center of the cafeteria. It came from the back corner. The hidden place. A divider wall blocked part of the room from view. Stacks of unused chairs leaned against the wall. And beside a gray trash can, sitting directly on the tile floor, was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her knees were pulled tightly to her chest. A plastic lunch tray rested in her lap like she was afraid to move it. She was trying to make herself small. Invisible. 2 boys stood a few feet away watching her. One whispered something. The other snorted with laughter. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. The girl's eyes flicked up toward him, then quickly down again. "Please," she whispered again. "Not here." Marcus didn't rush forward. Children who live with fear can feel sudden movement like danger. So he walked slowly, carefully, until he was a few feet away. Then he knelt down. His voice was calm and gentle. "Hey," he said softly. "You're not in trouble." The girl blinked at him, uncertain. Adults usually said those words right before punishment followed. Marcus noticed everything around her. The unused chairs stacked nearby. The empty table just past the divider. The trash can beside her shoulder. Then he saw it. Clipped to the strap of her small backpack was a laminated tag. 3 bold black letters. RLS. Below it, smaller printed words. Restricted lunch seating. Marcus didn't speak for a moment. He simply looked at the tag. Then he looked at the little girl again. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She swallowed. "Nora." "Nora," Marcus repeated softly. For a moment the noisy cafeteria faded away. "Can you tell me why you're sitting here?" Her eyes darted toward the cafeteria entrance, as if invisible rules might punish her for answering. "I'm supposed to," she said quickly. "It's the rule." Marcus glanced again at the stack of empty chairs, the unused table, the trash can. Something about the scene didn't feel like a mistake. It felt planned. He lowered his voice. "Who made that rule?" Nora's fingers tightened around the edge of her tray. She hesitated, and just as she opened her mouth to answer, footsteps entered the cafeteria behind Marcus. Slow, confident. Principal Calvin Hargrove. "Well," the principal said smoothly, his smile returning like a mask snapping back into place. "Mr. Thorne, there you are." For a brief moment, his eyes flicked down toward the little girl sitting on the floor. And something in that smile changed. "This area isn't part of the tour," Hargrove added lightly. Marcus stood slowly. But he wasn't looking at the cafeteria anymore. He was looking at a system that allowed a child to sit beside a trash can while dozens of empty chairs waited nearby. And across the room, Nora stared at the floor like she had just broken a rule by being seen. Marcus knew something in this building was very wrong. But he still didn't know the most painful truth. Why that little girl was truly sitting there. Marcus turned slowly toward Principal Hargrove. For a brief second neither man spoke. The cafeteria noise rolled on around them. Kids laughing, trays sliding across tables, a teacher calling for someone to finish their milk, but the little corner beside the trash can felt strangely quiet. Hargrove's smile held steady, polished and professional. "We were just about to continue the tour," he said pleasantly. "The media room is waiting." Marcus glanced once more toward Nora. She was staring at the floor again, shoulders drawn in tight, like a child who had learned the safest place in the world was the smallest one. Marcus's voice stayed calm. "She's sitting on the floor." Hargrove gave a small chuckle, the kind adults use when they want something to sound harmless. "A temporary seating adjustment," he said. "Routine classroom management." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He simply looked past Hargrove toward the empty chairs stacked along the wall. Then he looked toward the empty table only a few steps away. Then back to Nora. Children notice silence in ways adults forget. Nora's small hands tightened around her tray as if she could feel the conversation pressing against her. Hargrove cleared his throat lightly. "Mr. Thorne, I assure you this is being handled appropriately." Marcus finally spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. "What exactly is restricted lunch seating?" The principal's smile shifted slightly. "Occasionally we separate students for structure," he said. "It encourages responsibility." Marcus glanced at Nora again. Responsibility. The word hung in the air. She looked like she weighed maybe 50 pounds. Hargrove stepped closer, lowering his voice in a friendly tone meant for donors. "Children sometimes misunderstand routine procedures," he added. "We find it works best when adults guide the situation." Marcus nodded slowly. But he wasn't looking at Hargrove anymore. He was looking at the laminated tag clipped to Nora's backpack. Restricted lunch seating. He knelt again, ignoring the principal's careful shift of posture behind him. Nora flinched slightly when he lowered himself beside her again. Marcus kept his hands open, resting loosely on his knees. "Nora," he said gently. Her eyes lifted a little. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "If you sat at one of those tables," Marcus asked quietly, "what would happen?" Nora swallowed. Her eyes moved quickly toward the cafeteria entrance again, checking the invisible lines of authority children learn to watch. It's the rule," she said. Marcus nodded softly. "I know you said that." He waited. Silence stretched between them, but not in a way that pushed. It gave her space. Finally she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "They charge my mom." Marcus didn't move. For a moment the sentence didn't fully land. Then it did. "They charge your mom?" he repeated. Nora nodded quickly, like she had said something dangerous and wanted to fix it. "If I sit at a table," she whispered, "they send a fee notice home." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. A fee. Not detention. Not a warning. A bill. The kind of paper that lands on a kitchen table at night when a parent is already exhausted from work. He pictured it without trying. A small apartment, dim light, a mother reading another notice she couldn't afford. Nora kept talking in the quick, nervous way children do when they feel they've said too much. "I'm not supposed to cause trouble," she added. Marcus looked at her. She wasn't crying. Kids who grow up around struggle often learn early that crying doesn't change anything. Across the cafeteria, a bell rang loudly. A staff member called for the next group of students to line up. The world continued moving like nothing unusual was happening. Marcus stood slowly. As he did, his eyes scanned the room again. Teachers. Staff members. Adults who had walked past this corner 100 times. Most of them avoided looking directly at Nora. That was when he saw the woman behind the serving counter. Older. Tired eyes. A cafeteria worker wiping down a surface that was already spotless. For half a second their eyes met. She looked away quickly. Not the way someone looks away when they don't care. The way someone looks away when they care too much and know it's dangerous. Marcus turned back toward Hargrove. The principal was still smiling, though there was tension in the edges now. "Mr. Thorne," Hargrove said gently, "we really should continue the tour." Marcus nodded. "Of course." He stepped away from Nora. But as he walked toward the cafeteria exit with Hargrove beside him, something inside him refused to settle. The hallway outside felt brighter. Students passed by with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. Posters about kindness lined the walls. "We see every student." Marcus stopped briefly near the entrance. "Give me 1 minute," he said calmly. Before Hargrove could respond, Marcus stepped back into the cafeteria. Nora was still sitting there. Exactly where he had left her. The trash can beside her. The divider wall blocking half the room. The empty chairs still unused. Marcus knelt beside her again. Her shoulders stiffened immediately. "I'm not here to get you in trouble," he said softly. Nora looked up. For the first time there was something new in her expression. Not hope. Fear. Because children who live inside strict systems understand something adults forget. Being noticed can sometimes make things worse. Marcus lowered his voice. "Nora," he said gently, "who told you about the fee?" She hesitated. Her fingers curled tighter around the tray. For a moment Marcus thought she might stay silent. Then she leaned forward slightly and whispered something so quietly it barely carried through the cafeteria noise. "The office." Marcus felt the word settle like a stone. The office. Before he could ask another question, footsteps approached behind him again. But this time they weren't slow. They were quick. A staff aide stepped into the alcove. "There you are," she said sharply to Nora. Her voice dropped lower. "You know the rule." She reached for the little girl's arm. "Come on. Restricted kids don't sit up here." Nora stood immediately. Her tray wobbled. For a split second her eyes met Marcus's again. Wide, apologetic, as if she were sorry for causing trouble just by existing. The aide began guiding her deeper behind the divider, toward a tighter space behind a storage cart where fewer people would notice. Marcus didn't stop them. Not yet. But as he watched the little girl disappear behind that cart, something inside him locked firmly into place. Because now he understood one thing clearly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. And whatever rule had put Nora on that floor, it was only the surface of something much bigger hiding inside this school. Marcus stood still for a moment after the aide led Nora away. The cafeteria noise swallowed the moment almost instantly. Kids laughed again. Trays slid across tables. Someone shouted across the room for ketchup. Life continued the way it always did when uncomfortable truths tried to show themselves, by pretending nothing had happened. Principal Hargrove stepped closer beside him. "Well," he said lightly, adjusting the cuff of his jacket, "lunch periods can be chaotic." Marcus turned his head slowly. Hargrove's smile looked the same as before, but there was a new tension beneath it. The careful kind of tension people wear when they realize something might slip out of their control. Marcus spoke quietly. "You charge a child's mother for where she sits." Hargrove chuckled again, softer this time. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Marcus didn't reply. The principal leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "Students who violate certain behavioral expectations sometimes face structured consequences," he said smoothly. "Accountability helps children develop responsibility." Marcus glanced toward the divider where Nora had disappeared behind the storage cart. Responsibility. The word felt heavier every time someone said it. "Does she have a behavior report?" Marcus asked. Hargrove hesitated a fraction of a second. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "our staff manages hundreds of situations daily. I assure you, everything here is handled appropriately." Marcus studied his face. People in business often believed wealth made a man powerful. But Marcus had learned something different over the years. Power wasn't money. Power was systems. Systems protected themselves. And this man in front of him had spent years inside one. Marcus nodded slowly. "I see." The principal relaxed slightly, believing the conversation had ended. "Wonderful," Hargrove said. "Shall we continue the tour?" Marcus followed him out of the cafeteria. But his mind stayed behind. Behind the divider. Behind the storage cart. Behind the quiet place where a 7-year-old girl had been pushed out of sight. They walked down the hallway toward the media room where the rest of the donor group waited. Teachers smiled again as they passed. The building still looked perfect. Too perfect. Marcus noticed things now he hadn't noticed before. Students holding doors open while glancing quickly at teachers. Staff members whose smiles faded the moment the tour passed. The way certain hallways felt bright and welcoming, while others felt strangely empty. Marcus had seen buildings like this before. Places designed carefully for appearances. The tour ended 20 minutes later with applause, speeches, and polite thank yous. Board members shook Marcus's hand. "We're grateful for everything your foundation has done for schools like this," one of them said warmly. Marcus smiled politely. But Nora's small voice kept echoing in his mind. "Please, not here." When the meeting finally ended, Marcus walked out of the building alone. The afternoon sun was bright, almost too bright after the fluorescent lights inside. He paused beside his car but didn't open the door. Instead, he pulled out his phone. Dana answered on the second ring. "That was fast," she said. Marcus watched students playing across the schoolyard. "Dana," he said calmly, "I need information." "About?" "A policy called restricted lunch seating." There was a pause on the other end. "That sounds concerning," Dana said slowly. "It charges parents," Marcus added, "for where their children sit." Silence settled on the line. Dana's voice returned, sharper now. "Send me the name of the school." Marcus gave it to her. "Give me a few hours," she said. "If this policy exists in writing, I'll find it." Marcus ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. But he didn't drive away. Instead, he looked back at the school building. From the outside it looked warm, safe. Parents arriving to pick up their kids would never guess what lived inside that cafeteria corner. Marcus stood there longer than he expected. Long enough for the afternoon bell to ring. Students began pouring out of the building. Backpacks bouncing. Conversations loud and carefree. Children who looked exactly like children should look. Marcus watched carefully. Then he saw her. Nora. She walked slowly down the front steps, her small backpack hanging loosely on her shoulders. No one walked beside her. No friends. No teacher guiding her. Just a little girl moving quietly through the crowd. Marcus noticed something else. Her lunchbox. It hung from one hand, dented metal with a faded shooting star sticker peeling at the edges. She held it carefully, almost protectively. Children rushed past her in both directions. Nora kept walking toward the bus line. Marcus stepped forward. "Nora." She froze. Slowly she turned around. Her eyes widened when she recognized him. For a moment she looked frightened again, like being seen outside the cafeteria might somehow break another rule. Marcus crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over her. "Hey," he said gently. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tightened around the lunchbox handle. Marcus noticed the way the metal was slightly bent near the latch. "You heading home?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Bus." Another small nod. Marcus glanced at the lunchbox. "Did you eat today?" Nora hesitated. Then she opened the lid just enough to show him inside. Half a sandwich. An apple wrapped carefully in a napkin. The milk carton was missing. Marcus frowned slightly. "You didn't finish?" She shook her head. "Why not?" Nora looked down at the apple like it was something precious. "For my mom," she said simply. Marcus blinked. "For your mom." She nodded again. "Adults forget to eat sometimes." The sentence landed quietly between them. Not dramatic. Just honest. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. He had spent most of his life in rooms where people debated investments worth millions of dollars. But this moment, this small girl saving half an apple for her mother, felt heavier than any boardroom decision he had ever made. A bus driver called out from the curb. "Route 12. Nora closed the lunchbox quickly. She stepped toward the bus line. But before climbing the steps she turned back once. Just once. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't come back," she said. Marcus frowned slightly. "Why not?" Nora glanced toward the school building. Toward the office windows. Then back at him. Her eyes looked older than a 7-year-old's should. "Because," she said quietly, "they'll make my mom pay more if you ask questions." She stepped onto the bus. The door folded shut with a sharp hiss. Marcus stood there watching as the bus pulled away down the street. And for the first time that day, he realized something even darker than the policy itself. Someone inside that school had already warned the child what happens when powerful people start noticing the truth. Marcus stood on the curb long after the bus disappeared around the corner. The street grew quiet again. Parents finished loading younger kids into cars. A crossing guard folded her stop sign and walked toward the sidewalk. But Marcus didn't move. Nora's words stayed with him. "They'll make my mom pay more if you ask questions." It wasn't the fear in her voice that troubled him most. It was the certainty. Children sometimes exaggerate danger because their world feels big and confusing. But Nora hadn't sounded confused. She had sounded like someone repeating a rule she had already seen enforced. Marcus finally opened the car door and sat behind the wheel. For several seconds he just stared through the windshield at the empty school entrance. Then his phone rang. "Dana. I found something," she said immediately. Marcus started the engine but didn't pull away. "Go ahead." "The policy is real," she said. "Restricted lunch seating." Marcus leaned back slightly. "And?" "It's listed under behavioral accountability guidelines." Marcus frowned. "But there's a problem." "What kind?" Dana paused. "There's no behavioral criteria listed." Marcus didn't speak. Dana continued. "It allows schools to separate students during lunch if they violate environmental expectations." "That's vague," Marcus said. "Exactly." Marcus tapped the steering wheel slowly. "Is there a fee structure?" Another pause. "Yes." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "How much?" "It depends on the violation," Dana said. "But technically, parents can be charged for supervision costs." Marcus let out a quiet breath. Supervision costs. The kind of phrase that sounds clean on paper. Dana's voice lowered. "Marcus, I ran a second search. And the policy wasn't written by the school." Marcus opened his eyes again. "It came from the district office." The words settled heavily. Systems. Marcus had suspected that already. "What about Lincoln Grove?" he asked. Dana answered immediately. "There's no disciplinary record attached to a student named Nora." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "So she's not listed as a behavior case?" "No." "Then why is she on the floor?" Dana hesitated. "That's the question." Marcus finally pulled away from the curb and drove slowly down the street. Children walked along the sidewalks with backpacks swinging behind them. Some laughing. Some arguing. Some racing each other toward home. Marcus thought about Nora walking alone, saving half an apple for her mother. "Dana," he said quietly. "Yes." "I want the audit moved up." "You're serious?" "Yes." "That means stepping into district territory." Marcus watched the school disappear in the rearview mirror. "Then that's where we step." Dana was silent for a moment. "Okay," she said finally. "But if this turns into something bigger, they'll push back." Marcus gave a faint smile. "They already have." That night Marcus sat alone in his study. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of an old clock on the wall. On the desk in front of him lay several documents Dana had already sent over. Policy outlines. District memos. Compliance guidelines. Marcus read each page slowly. The language was careful. Neutral. Professional. But the deeper he read, the more a pattern appeared. Words that never mentioned poverty, yet somehow always landed on families who had the least. Environmental expectations. Accountability structure. Supervision recovery. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His father used to say something when Marcus was young. If someone uses too many fancy words, it usually means they're hiding something simple. Marcus looked at the documents again. This wasn't about behavior. It was about money. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. His housekeeper stepped into the doorway. Mr. Thorne? Yes. There's someone at the gate asking for you. Marcus frowned slightly. At this hour? He says he works at Lincoln Grove Elementary. Marcus stood slowly. Did he give a name? He said Patel. Marcus's memory flickered. The cafeteria worker. The tired eyes behind the serving counter. Send him in, Marcus said. A few minutes later the man stepped into the study. He looked uncomfortable in the large room, standing just inside the door like he wasn't sure if he should be there. Marcus gestured toward a chair. Please. The man shook his head. I won't stay long. His hands were rough from years of work. I shouldn't even be here, he added quietly. Marcus waited. Sometimes people needed silence more than questions. Finally the man spoke. You saw the girl today. Marcus nodded. Nora. The man glanced toward the window as if making sure no one was listening. They call it RLS, he said. Restricted lunch seating. I know. The man shifted his weight. But that's not what it really is. Marcus watched him carefully. What is it? The man swallowed. It's a list. Marcus felt his attention sharpen. A list of what? The man reached into his jacket pocket. For a moment he hesitated. Then he pulled out a folded napkin. He placed it carefully on the desk. Marcus unfolded it. Inside were several names written in tight handwriting. Nora Reyes. And others. Marcus looked up. What is this? The man's voice dropped lower. Kids whose parents can't keep up with the lunch balances. Marcus stared at the paper. They move them during lunch, the man continued quietly. Separate corner. Less supervision. If they break the rule. Marcus finished the sentence. They charge the parents. The man nodded. Marcus looked back down at the names. How many students? The man shook his head. More than that list. Marcus felt the weight of the paper in his hands. How long has this been happening? The man answered without hesitation. Years. Marcus looked up again. Why bring this to me? The man's eyes softened slightly. Because that little girl. She still says thank you when we hand her milk. Marcus felt something shift inside him again. The man turned toward the door. I never came here, he said quietly. Marcus nodded. You didn't. The man paused before leaving. One more thing, he added. Marcus looked up. The school cameras, the man said. They point right at that corner. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You're saying it's recorded? The man gave a small nod. Every day. He stepped out of the room and disappeared into the night. Marcus sat alone again in the quiet study. The napkin still open in his hands. Names written across it. Proof that Nora wasn't the only one. And suddenly Marcus understood something important. The system hadn't made a mistake. It had built a machine. And now that machine had left fingerprints. Marcus stayed in his chair long after the front gate closed behind the man. The folded napkin lay open on the desk under the soft lamplight. Names. Small names. Children. He ran his finger slowly across the paper. Nora Reyes. 3 more below it. 2 of them had small marks beside the names like someone had been keeping track of something. Marcus had spent most of his life reading numbers that shaped markets and industries. Balance sheets, profit forecasts, corporate contracts. But this small piece of paper felt heavier than any document he had ever signed. Because numbers on a spreadsheet could be explained. Children sitting beside trash cans could not. His phone buzzed again. Dana. Marcus picked it up immediately. I was just about to call you, he said. Dana's voice came through steady but alert. I've been digging into the district approval chain. And the policy was signed off by someone higher than the school. Marcus leaned back slightly. Who? There was a pause. Assistant Superintendent Len Brooks. Marcus looked down again at the napkin. Systems. They always started higher up than people thought. Marcus, Dana continued, if Brooks authorized this structure, then Hargrove isn't acting alone. I know. Which means if you challenge this publicly, they'll close ranks. Marcus gave a quiet breath. They already have. Dana didn't argue with that. What's your next move? She asked. Marcus looked again at the names. There's camera footage. Dana went silent for a moment. Are you sure? Yes. Then we don't move yet. Marcus frowned slightly. Why not? Because if we ask for it too early, they'll erase it. Marcus understood immediately. Systems protected themselves. And if we wait? Dana's voice lowered. Then we catch them trying. Marcus nodded slowly. Give me 24 hours, she said. I'll file a records preservation notice first thing in the morning. Marcus ended the call and sat quietly again. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Outside the window, the city lights stretched across the night. He thought about Nora's small hands carefully wrapping half an apple in a napkin. Adults forget to eat sometimes. The sentence kept returning to him. Not dramatic. Just a child describing survival. The next morning the sky over Lincoln Grove Elementary looked calm and ordinary. Morning buses rolled in one by one. Kids stepped off carrying backpacks and lunchboxes. Parents dropped younger children at the curb before rushing off to work. Inside the cafeteria, the first lunch period had already started. Marcus walked in through the front doors like any other visitor. The same sticker badge rested on his jacket again. Visitor. The receptionist recognized him immediately. Oh, Mr. Thorne, she said, surprised. We weren't expecting you today. Marcus smiled politely. I had a few follow-up questions. She hesitated slightly. Principal Hargrove is in a meeting this morning. That's all right, Marcus said calmly. I'll wait. He didn't go to the office. Instead, he walked slowly down the hallway toward the cafeteria. The same posters still covered the walls. Kindness matters. Every child belongs. Marcus noticed something different now. The words didn't feel warm anymore. They felt like decorations. The cafeteria doors were already open. Noise poured out into the hallway. Children talking. Chairs scraping. Someone laughing loudly. Marcus stepped inside. The room looked almost identical to the day before. Tables filled with students. Teachers moving between rows. Lunch trays sliding across counters. Everything normal. Everything polished. Too polished. Marcus walked toward the back of the room without drawing attention. His eyes scanned the divider wall. The storage cart. The hidden corner. And then he saw her. Nora. But something had changed. She wasn't beside the trash can today. She had been pushed farther back. Behind the storage cart. Almost completely hidden from the main cafeteria. Her tray balanced in her lap. Her shoulders stiff. Her eyes lowered the way children look when they are trying to disappear. Marcus felt a quiet anger settle deep in his chest. Not loud anger. Cold anger. The kind that doesn't burn out. He moved closer slowly. Nora noticed him before he reached her. Her eyes widened. For a second she looked almost frightened. Marcus knelt again a few feet away. "Hi, Nora," he said softly. She glanced quickly toward the cafeteria entrance. Checking. Watching. "Hi," she whispered. Marcus kept his voice calm. "Did you eat breakfast today?" She nodded. Mom made toast. A faint smile flickered across her face when she said it. Marcus noticed the lunchbox beside her. The same dented metal box with the fading shooting star. "Did your mom eat too?" he asked gently. Nora hesitated. Then she shrugged. "She said she would later." Marcus looked at the tray in her lap. Half the sandwich was already wrapped carefully in a napkin again. Saving it. Just like yesterday. Two boys drifted near the divider again. One of them bumped the edge of Nora's tray as he walked past. The milk carton tipped over. White liquid spilled slowly across the plastic tray. The boys laughed. Not loud. Just loud enough. Nora froze. Her hands moved quickly to grab a napkin. She wiped the milk carefully, desperately, like she was racing against punishment. Marcus lifted his eyes. A teacher stood across the room near the lunch line. She glanced toward the sound. For a moment their eyes met. The teacher looked away, turned her back. Marcus felt the truth settle deeper. This wasn't bullying. Bullying hid from adults. This was something else. This was permission. Nora kept wiping the tray until the napkin was soaked. Then she folded it neatly and placed it beside her lunchbox. Marcus spoke softly. "Nora." She looked up. "Does this happen to other kids too?" Her eyes flickered toward the tables, toward the cafeteria staff, toward the invisible lines that controlled the room. Then she whispered one word. "Yes." Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He stepped 2 paces away before answering. Dana's voice came through quickly. "The approval chain is confirmed," she said. Marcus kept his eyes on Nora sitting on the floor behind the cart. "Who signed it?" he asked quietly. Dana answered. "Len Brooks." Marcus's gaze didn't move. He watched Nora carefully fold the other half of her sandwich again. Saving it. Always saving it. And in that quiet moment Marcus understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't just a cruel rule inside one school. It was a system. Built deliberately. Approved at the top. And now that system had just left its name on the paper trail. Marcus ended the call slowly, his hand lowering the phone back into his coat pocket. The cafeteria noise continued around him, loud and ordinary, but the world in that corner felt strangely quiet. Nora was still wiping the last drops of milk from her tray. Her small fingers moved carefully, folding the damp napkin as if neatness could erase what had just happened. Marcus stepped back toward her and knelt again. He didn't mention the boys. He didn't mention the teacher who had looked away. Instead, he spoke the way someone speaks when they know a child already carries too much. "Nora," he said gently, "can I ask you something else?" She looked up slowly. There was hesitation in her eyes, but also something softer now. A kind of cautious trust. "What happens," Marcus asked quietly, "if you don't sit here?" Nora's shoulders tightened immediately. "They send a notice home." Marcus kept his voice calm. "What kind of notice?" She hesitated again, then whispered the word like it was something heavy. "A bill." Marcus felt the word settle inside his chest. Not a warning. Not detention. A bill. Nora lowered her eyes to the tray again. "Mom gets really tired when the letters come," she said softly. Marcus didn't interrupt. "She works nights," Nora continued. "Cleaning offices." Her voice carried a quiet matter-of-fact tone children use when describing hard things they've already accepted. She says the letters always come when she's already trying really hard. Marcus looked at the half sandwich wrapped neatly in a napkin beside her lunchbox. "And that's why you save food?" he asked. Nora nodded. "Sometimes she forgets dinner." The simplicity of the sentence hit harder than anything dramatic could have. Marcus had seen poverty before. He funded shelters, scholarships, meal programs. But sitting 2 feet away from it, watching a child plan meals like a small adult, was different. Across the cafeteria, a cafeteria worker stepped behind the serving counter. Marcus recognized her immediately. Ms. Patel. Her tired eyes flickered briefly toward the corner where Nora sat. For a moment she looked like she might walk over. But then her shoulders stiffened. She turned back to stacking trays. Marcus understood that kind of fear. In systems like this, speaking the truth could cost people their jobs. He turned back to Nora. "Nora," he said softly, "does your mom know you sit here?" Her fingers stopped moving. For the first time she didn't answer right away. Then she shook her head. "No." Marcus felt the weight of that answer. "She thinks I sit with the other kids," Nora said. "Why don't you tell her?" Nora shrugged slightly. "If she knows, she'll come to the school." Marcus waited. "And then they'll send more letters." Marcus glanced toward the divider wall again. Toward the hidden space someone had carefully created. Not an accident. A system. He lowered his voice. "Nora," he said, "how many kids sit back here?" Her eyes flickered toward the tables again. She didn't point. Children inside strict systems rarely point. But she whispered. "Different ones." Marcus felt his phone vibrate again. A message this time. Dana. Records preservation notice filed. Cameras protected. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. He stood slowly. "Are you leaving?" Nora asked quietly. Marcus paused. "Not yet." She looked relieved for a moment, though she tried to hide it. Marcus walked toward the cashier counter casually, as if he were just another visitor observing the lunch period. Behind the register sat a thick binder. Black marker labeled it in plain handwriting. RLS Seating Compliance. Marcus's eyes rested on it for a second. Someone had placed it openly on the shelf. Not hidden. That was the part that disturbed him most. When systems become normal, people stop hiding them. He picked up a plastic tray from the stack nearby. Pretending to inspect it, he leaned slightly closer to the counter. Inside the binder were pages of printed rosters. Names. Dates. Columns marked with small checkboxes. Marcus didn't touch it. He didn't need to. Just seeing the pages confirmed everything. Across the cafeteria, Principal Hargrove appeared in the doorway. His smile returned the moment he spotted Marcus. The principal walked toward him with smooth confidence. "Mr. Thorne," he said warmly. "Back again so soon." Marcus set the tray back down. "I had a few more questions." Hargrove nodded pleasantly. "Of course." Marcus gestured lightly toward the back corner. "About the restricted seating policy." The principal's smile didn't disappear, but it tightened. "I thought we clarified that yesterday." "Not completely," Marcus replied. Hargrove glanced briefly toward the divider, toward the hidden corner. Then his attention returned to Marcus. "Policies can sometimes look harsher than they really are," he said calmly. "Our goal is to maintain a structured environment." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "By billing parents?" Hargrove's smile faded by a fraction. "That language is misleading," he said. "Then explain it." For a moment the principal didn't answer. He simply studied Marcus. People who run systems are good at recognizing threats. And Marcus could see the moment Hargrove realized something had changed. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mr. Thorne," he said quietly, "schools deal with sensitive family situations every day." Marcus held his gaze. "Exactly." Hargrove's expression hardened slightly. "Which is why outside interference can sometimes create more harm than good." Marcus didn't move. Behind them, Nora sat quietly on the floor behind the cart. Almost invisible. Hargrove followed Marcus's gaze briefly. Then he spoke again, voice even lower. "That child's mother already struggles financially." Marcus said nothing. Hargrove continued softly. "If the district begins reviewing family circumstances, it could lead to involvement from child services." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "There it is," he said quietly. Hargrove's smile returned, thin and careful. "I'm simply saying we must be careful not to make things worse." Marcus looked past him again. At Nora. At the careful way she had wrapped half a sandwich for her mother. Then Marcus turned back slowly. His voice stayed calm. "You're threatening a mother because her daughter sat at the wrong table." Hargrove didn't answer. But his silence said enough. Across the cafeteria, Ms. Patel moved past Marcus carrying a tray of cups. As she passed behind him, her hand brushed lightly against his sleeve. Something small slipped into Marcus's palm. A folded napkin. She kept walking without turning her head. Marcus opened his hand slowly. Inside the napkin were 3 hurried words written in pen. "It's a list." Marcus looked back toward the hidden corner where Nora sat. And in that quiet moment he realized something that made the entire situation even darker. Nora wasn't just being punished. She had been selected. Marcus closed his hand slowly around the folded napkin. 3 words. "It's a list." For a moment he simply stood there, feeling the quiet weight of that message settle into place beside everything else he had already seen. The hidden corner. The laminated tag. The careful little half-apple saved for a tired mother. Across the cafeteria, Nora still sat on the floor behind the cart, trying to finish her lunch as quietly as possible, like the less noise she made the safer she would be. Marcus slipped the napkin into his pocket and looked back at Principal Hargrove. The man's smile had returned, but now Marcus could see what lived underneath it. Control. "Mr. Thorne," Hargrove said smoothly, "I hope we can put this misunderstanding behind us." Marcus held his gaze. "Not today." For a brief second the principal's smile cracked. But Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't create a scene. He simply walked away. 2 days later the district boardroom was colder than any courtroom Marcus had ever stepped into. Fluorescent lights hummed above a long table where district officials sat with neat folders and carefully practiced expressions. Len Brooks sat near the center. His suit looked perfect. His smile looked practiced. Principal Hargrove sat beside him, posture straight, hands folded. Marcus stood quietly near the back of the room. Dana sat beside him, a thick binder open on the table. The meeting had started 20 minutes earlier. Procedures, agendas, budget discussions. All the small things institutions use to stretch time when they know something difficult is waiting. Finally Dana stood. Her voice was calm, professional. "We've filed a formal request regarding the district's restricted lunch seating policy." Len Brooks adjusted his tie. "We've already clarified that the policy is designed for behavioral management." Dana slid a document across the table. "The documentation we obtained suggests something different." Brooks glanced down at the papers. Names, dates, lunch balances. Every child listed under RLS. Every child from a family already struggling financially. The room grew quieter. Hargrove shifted slightly in his chair. "This is being taken out of context," he said. Marcus stepped forward. "No," he said quietly. "It's being seen clearly." Dana pressed a button on the laptop beside her. The screen behind the boardroom table flickered to life. Security footage. A cafeteria. Timestamp, 12:17 p.m. Nora appeared on the screen. Small. Quiet. Carrying her tray carefully. An aide approached her and pointed toward the divider. Nora walked slowly to the hidden corner. She sat on the floor beside the trash can. Students laughed nearby. Teachers passed by. No one stopped. The room stayed silent as the footage played. Len Brooks cleared his throat. This appears to be an isolated incident. Dana changed the video. Another day. Another child. The same corner. Another child again. Same corner. Same floor. Same quiet humiliation. Finally the screen went dark. Marcus stepped forward slowly. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply spoke the truth that had been sitting in his chest since the moment Nora whispered those words. Your system taught a 7-year-old girl to eat on the floor so her mother wouldn't be punished for being poor. The room went completely still. That sentence didn't sound like legal language. It sounded like truth. Len Brooks's smile disappeared. Hargrove stared down at the table. A board member finally spoke. This policy is being suspended immediately. Another added quietly, and we will be launching a full investigation. Marcus didn't celebrate. Justice in rooms like this rarely came with applause. It came with paperwork. Weeks passed. The RLS policy vanished quietly from the district handbook. New guidelines appeared. Lunch balances were forgiven. Parents received letters that sounded strangely apologetic. Principal Hargrove resigned before the investigation finished. Len Brooks stepped down shortly after. But the most important change didn't happen in the boardroom. It happened in a small cafeteria. Marcus returned one afternoon. The divider wall was gone. The storage cart had been moved. The hidden corner no longer existed. Tables filled the room from wall to wall. Children sat wherever they wanted. Marcus stood near the doorway watching quietly. Then he saw her. Nora sat at a table near the window. 3 other kids sat with her. One of them was laughing about something. Nora laughed too. The sound looked new on her. When she noticed Marcus, her eyes widened with recognition. She stood quickly and walked toward him. Her lunchbox still had the same faded shooting star. But now it sat full and balanced in her hands. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi, Nora." She looked back toward the table. "I sit there now." Marcus nodded. "I can see that." She opened the lunchbox slightly. Inside was a full sandwich, fruit, and milk. "No saving today?" Marcus asked gently. Nora smiled. "Mom eats dinner now." Marcus felt warmth spread quietly through his chest. "Good." She reached into the lunchbox and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I made you something." Marcus unfolded it. 5 careful words written in big uneven letters. "Thank you for seeing me." For a moment he couldn't speak. Not because he was surprised, but because sometimes the smallest words carried the biggest weight. Marcus knelt so he was at eye level with her. "You know something, Nora?" "What?" "The world changes when people decide not to look away." She thought about that for a moment. Then she nodded like it made sense. As she walked back to her table, Marcus looked around the cafeteria again. Children laughing. Chairs scraping. Lunch trays clattering. Normal. And for the first time since that whisper in the hidden corner, the room finally felt the way a school should feel. Because sometimes the richest man in the room isn't the one with the most money. Sometimes it's the one who simply refuses to ignore a child who asks for kindness. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing and tell us in the comments which region you're watching from today.